afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our grand finale day here at the inaugural Abu Dhabi Global Healthcare Week. We are so excited to welcome you here on the M42 main stage. We've had a fantastic 2.5 days of programming, and we are well into day 3. We are keeping the momentum up, and the level and the illustrious lineup of speakers, they continue. This particular panel discussion, we have some very special guests joining us, and I have a special gentleman who is going to be moderating this session. I often introduce my M42 colleagues, I'm going to call them, as my co-hosts. And Elbara Elkani, the Senior VP Operations M42, please do give him a big round of applause. He certainly is my co-host. Elbara, may I ask you to pick up your mic, because between you and I, we're going to discuss this particular topic area. It really speaks to the heart of M42, population health. How does environmental testing contribute to health, not just healthcare? And by that, I mean the health, not just healthcare. That's very important to M42.
Absolutely, Amandeep. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. M42, we believe that anything that touches a human or is ingested by a human or is around a human affects the human. So environment testing is a key component of our strategy on how we, first of all, analyze the environment, but more importantly, how we correlate that data to the impact on us as human beings. So this topic is very dear to our hearts, and I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our special guest, His Excellency Hassan Al-Hosni, the Managing Director of Bayanat.
Please do give him a big round of applause.
And His Excellency Ahmed Al-Hashimi, the Executive Director of the Environment Agency of Abu Dhabi.
And please do join us on stage, Dr. Wael Elamin, the M42's Medical Director of Environmental Sciences, Dr. Tiago Cardoso, M42's R&D Scientist for Omics, Dr. Greg Brudecki, M42 Associate Director of Environmental Sciences Wastewater. What a wonderful panel cast list we have with us. Give them a big round of applause, and over to you, Elbara.
Thank you all. Please take a seat, please. So I think just in the introduction, we want to set the foundation and maybe also try to understand environmental sciences a bit better. I think there's probably a lot of misconceptions that this is sort of about just sustainability, green living, eco-friendliness, and what have you. But in reality, the environmental science testing and integration of data, and we'll come to the integration of multiple data sets during our discussion, is very integral to what we believe health of an individual is. And I know, Dr. Wael, we have this term that we coined from the World Health Organization, which is One Health, right? So I'd like you maybe, if you don't mind, Dr. Wael, describe to us and clarify what is environmental science testing, how do we do at M42, and how we see that reflect onto an individual's health, be it through a hospitalization in the healthcare ecosystem, or be it through the well-being of the individual themselves.
So thank you very much, Al-Bara, for the introduction. And I think we're coming to realization that as a species, humans are dependent and interdependent on other things. We're dependent on the food we eat. We're dependent on the water we drink. We're dependent on the pathogens that infect us. We're dependent on the animals that live with us. We're dependent on our pets. We're dependent on the air we breathe. We're dependent on the winds, the rains, and this realization made us understand and appreciate that we know little about all of that, and we need to know more. And there's a consequential effect of all of that to what we define as health. The word health in itself would connotate with the individual's health. So when you say you're unwell, you're talking about, oh, I have a cold, I have a cough, I have a flu. However, there's both an upstream and a downstream effect. So there's a causation and causality associated with everything around us. And there's a lot of data in all of that. What we're trying to achieve here is reach a better understanding of how does the apple that I ate today that came from Venezuela, how is it going to affect my health? And how are the excrements of that apple that I will pass into the environment lead to an effect to the soil, which in itself may or may not lead to a better species of plants or animals? How will it affect the seas around us? Will my beaches look the same? And in hospitals, we are very concentrated at looking at the individual, classically. What we're coming to realization is outside, there's a lot of regulation and there's a lot of testing, especially in countries that import and export with anything like food. Here in the UAE, we work very closely with our partners, Abu Dhabi Quality and Conformity Council, who test and ensure that what we get is in compliance with whatever we should have. However, and we're going to have a talk later on about the epigenetics, how this affects our health. I was born in Sudan, and am I designed to eat the carbohydrates that are produced in Mexico based on the wheat that I get from Mexico, which is based on a very particular genetically modified wheat plant, which is required for us here in the environment. So I think it's a combination of everything that would help ensure that we live a better, more productive life.
Thank you, Dr. Weil. Maybe just as a follow-up question, I know that M42 is conducting a lot of testing, be it through wastewater analysis on hundreds of different analytes on a daily basis, or through our partnership with Abu Dhabi Quality Conformity Council at Central Testing Lab. But can you give us some real-life or real-world use cases of where the data that's been analyzed today has supported in either regulatory changes or impacting the healthcare ecosystem to support the sort of well-being of our population and community?
So the best example that comes to mind here is COVID. Testing wastewater for COVID, or even before COVID, 50, 60 years ago, many of you would have watched Game of Thrones. There was a Jon Snow in the Game of Thrones, but there's a more famous Jon Snow who sort of discovered the cholera outbreak by investigating sewage and wastewater. But in the COVID outbreak, we were supporting the Abu Dhabi government, along with Khalifa University at the time, to get signals of peaks and troughs for COVID and identifying where these peaks and troughs are 2 weeks prior to the outbreak. So we were getting these signals 2 weeks prior to the outbreak. We expanded the tests along with my colleagues, and we actually currently run one of the biggest labs with the largest and widest array of tests anywhere in the planet. To monitor for all risks, infectious and non-infectious.
I think Dr. White has been quite humble here, because the data that's being generated through RASID specifically is millions of data points that is all being analyzed through our machine learning tools. That's ultimately a job is to predict outbreaks prior to an outbreak happening. It's a very unique type of analysis on a very unique type of data set. So that has really allowed us to support our partners in understanding what's happening in the ecosystem and acting proactively on the data that's been available. So with that, I would maybe move to Dr. Greg. Dr. Greg is a scientist that sits within our wastewater analysis, who's helped us develop what we are doing today. So Dr. Greg, can you maybe explain to the audience what is different about a facility like RASID that does wastewater analysis compared to a standard lab that's doing testing within its facilities for similar analytes?
The major difference is what we are doing and why we are doing. So when you test certain products, as Dr. Weil mentioned, you have specific target of molecules that you want to detect and associate with certain quality products or components, yeah? And what we are doing is we are screening for almost everything what is possible. We have huge number of scientists who came to work with us from worldwide, who are expert in the field that they are basically hired to do. And we are having one of the biggest number of analytical instruments, highly sophisticated instruments, which is capable of doing more than 400 different target molecules and more than 5,000 different untargeted molecules with the use of highly sophisticated libraries. Sorry. So by having access to all these amazing establishments of the science in the previous years, we can achieve what is basically impossible, and we can make sure that the local environment, local society, local water sample, wastewater sample, any sort of food-related products can be tested by us, and we can confirm that they are free of any hazardous substances or pathogenic biological objects. So that's basically, I think, is ultimate message of what is difference between us as a research, investigation, surveillance department in collaboration with ADQCC and any other commercial laboratory that focuses probably on a very small portfolio of the target molecules.
Thank you, Dr. Greg. And I think what's important to note here as well is that everything we are consuming and ingesting has to go through rigorous assessments, both if it's manufactured, imported, or grown locally or imported from abroad. It's critical now with science is developed that we're modifying our food, construction development, and all the rest of it. It confirms to certain standards to ensure that we have the safety in our communities. So this type of facilities are very important. But also, to Dr. Wild's point, what we excrete from our bodies, to be crude, has a significant element of risks and investigation that you can do off it to understand the likelihood of something happening, because this is ultimately what you're ingesting. So these elements of what our two colleagues have described have been very important. But maybe just to move on to Dr. Tiago. Dr. Tiago, I know that we've worked on multiple projects to do with genomics in the environment. So this is maybe non-genomic testing in the environment, but there's been some significant movement and traction in sequencing particular species of plants, marine species, sequencing of marine water and eDNA. Can you maybe just give us a bit of a simple understanding of what environmental DNA means, the projects we might have worked on, and also when it came to the plant sequencing, how that's impactful to us as humans as well?
Thanks, Alvara, for having me here. Thanks the audience to be here as well. So 3 questions. What environmental DNA means, it's everything that's no human, no animal that is free in the environment. We are sequencing and aggregating all this data, no human, plants, from marine biology as well, from the soil. And the idea is to gather data and build a platform that we can understand what is outside there and make meaningful understanding for the society of that. For example, when you look to the desert, we have the gaff tree. It's the symbol of resilience of UE, right? When you look to that plant outside, it doesn't trigger your mind to understand why this plant stays green all the year in this rush environment that's the desert outside. What are the metabolites that that plant has? Which are the genes that later on are translated into proteins that makes that plant be resilient and be green all the year. So this triggers my imagination for sure. Also our excellences here. And that's our mission. Understand the environment, generate the data, and translate it into meaningful information to support our decision makers to make informed decisions how to preserve, how to use in a wise manner for the next generation, I would say, to have that things beautiful that we have today.
Excellent. I think that maybe we unpack this very slightly, if you don't mind, Dr. Tiago. So when we talked about the gaff tree and the resilience of a gaff tree, I think it's really important to see the correlation that we can pull from informing decisions based on plants, animals that are resilient in specific environments. So if we know that this plant can live in the middle of the desert with no water under these extremely harsh conditions, first of all, from a food security perspective, how can we utilize that information to allow us to have more resilient food. You know, when COVID hit, the biggest issue that we had was the disruption in the supply chain, right? Importing of our goods, importing of our services. So it's critical from a national perspective that we make sure that we have food security on top of our agenda. And we have to do this by growing our own foodstuffs, but to grow your own foodstuff in an environment like we live in the UAE, in a very desert, hot environment, requires very unique tools. And I believe this is a catalyst for those tools that will eventually lead to hopefully supporting the government agencies in identifying the right species and specific species that will thrive in this environment. But if I would like just to slightly, maybe a follow-up question to your point, Dr. Tiago, on the eDNA. I know once we collect ocean water, I think most of the genomic data that is extracted from the ocean water is unidentifiable, i.e. we don't have something we can compare it against. So what does that mean for us in this type of environment, and how do you think that could progress further?
Yeah, let me explain to the audience for understand. When you collect water from the ocean, mainly, in our broad vision, the ocean is the rich media of the earth. The life comes from there. The oxygen we are inhaling today is produced there. When you sequence water and you go for taxonomic analysis to identify what is the components that compounds the biome of this, nearly 60% of that sample is unidentified. If you look to the other side of the equation, you are opening windows to discover drugs, to find out what are those bacteria. Is there metabolites over there that could cure diseases in the future? We are working in projects to use AI to design drugs and to find out new antibiotics. The ocean is the most rich environment, I would say. Provide us information. Understanding this, generating data, and again, unlocking that data through our capabilities is what we are doing, and what we did with the Jayun Research Advanced Boat and with the OceanX as well.
Thank you, Dr. Tiago. That takes us beautifully on to our next question for His Excellency on the Jayun project. I think this sparked a form of new imagination for us to M42, and spearheaded by the Environment Agency of Abu Dhabi. It was visionary in our opinion. It had a concept that was very unique to what we're trying to do on a global level. So I'd love for you to maybe tell us where we started, why we're doing this type of work, and where you see the collaborations moving forward, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First, I'd like to thank M42 for invitation. It's the first time for me to join a health sector event. So I'm really proud of that. And joining the health, thank you. I have a very funny story about the link between the environment and health. At the beginning, I choose my subject and biodiversity because I love animals. So I believe everyone is loving animals. And I remember in one of the projects, I met one developer, and I tried to protect the sea turtle beach and nest from erosion and development. And I tried to say, be careful, there are sea turtles, you could harm them. And the answer shocked me at that time. He said, what if all sea turtles die off? Then I said, you know, my trigger of loving animals is totally different. So we need to think twice how we can convince others. And now my answer, even if you don't like environment and if you don't like biodiversity, you have to like them because you need to care about yourself, about your health. So this is very important as essential. And Jayun, or our research vessel project, it was supported by our leadership. We're proud to have the first research vessel in UAE, and it was the most advanced in the region. In order to discover the sea, our sea is not discovered yet. I'm telling people some stories that has really shocked everyone. Imagine in the last survey we did in our waters, we discovered a ray fish, huge fish, first time in science. So that's every time when we find a new species to science, it should be an insect or bacteria, but huge fish, this is amazing. And I remembered I read one of the reports about a study AIA in the region, and what shocked me, most of the photos they have it for unidentified species. So that's mean we need to do a lot and lot. That's why we've also worked closely with M42 and Bayanat to boost the research in the marine area. There is a study mentioned that more than 95% of the medicine originally from plants. But what I'm saying, if we discover the sea, 90% and more will be from the sea. Therefore, I really invite everyone working in health sector to come on board of our research vessel J1. We are willing really to fund research related to healthcare in our research vessel that will be cross not only UAE, but also we can move it towards the Gulf. The species we have it is so unique. We did a lot of work related to eDNA. Until now, people shocked, and Dr. Thiago and Wael, till now we are doing analysis. Although we finished our research long time ago, because this field is so new, we need to link it and to do a lot of correlation to understand what is going on.
Your Excellency, I could have listened to you all day long, to be honest. The passion you have for this subject is unprecedented. But I think to your point, everything in the environment has a link to us. And your statistic you use on how we've developed medications throughout the years from plants, there's actually a project that we're hopefully starting soon in collaboration with international partners where we're going to look at how we can develop, I think, antibiotics, and maybe Dr. White can speak about this, from the environment as well. So I think we need to go back and look at where things came from. And retrospectively now, imagine this should now be the basis of where we move forward. So I think this is really, really important. So thank you so much for those comments. And I'll move to my last question, last but not least, to His Excellency Hassan. I don't understand, Hassan. How does a geospatial company like Bayanat first of all, have interest in such projects? And how does it benefit your vision and mission and strategy as a geospatial company? So if you can just educate me at least, please.
Well, first of all, it's really truly a pleasure to be in this platform with M42, which I consider part of our family. We work closely with you, with the M42 team since the beginning. We've worked with the healthcare lab since the beginning, and all the sophistication and looking at molecules or microbiotics or all of these different things, it becomes simpler when it's visualized the right way. And this is where Bayanat comes into play. We look at the geospatial products and the geological user interface that will simplify the visual aspect of what these great scientists are doing. As an example, last year we've sponsored a race that circumnavigated the globe. And across his race, he actually picked water samples from all the different seas. So we talk about, the existence of microplastics in our seas and everything. But when you visually see it on a map and see that the microplastics have reached the furthest southern ocean, it becomes alerting. When you see that, the migration of albatross, some birds, that are known for a specific, historically, to go through a specific route. When you see that route changing, it gives you another alert, right? So it's how you actually visualize it the right way, and then build the foundation to create on one hand, the lesson learned from all of that, and then connect it to other data streams. So you have a longer, more detailed story. So if the bird migration is changing, or the microplastic have reached this point, or as His Excellency mentioned, certain species are evolving or changing or coming to a region that is not. There definitely are other, as Dr. Wael mentioned, it's all consequential, right? So I need to look into these consequences and the sequence of things that are occurring. So what we do is actually try to visualize it all into one aspect. And then on top of that, you create the different layers and layers. So whether it's human interface or human encountered through the sewage control and everything, so we can see all of that, or it's environmental, it's a freak of nature. And we've seen a couple of weeks ago the rainstorm and what happened, but this is unprecedented in the UAE. So what other outcomes or impacts will come or will occur from that. Not only from animal perspective, from insect side, right? So with water ponds comes mosquitoes, comes certain insects and everything. The entire spectrum of life might be impacted by such incident. So for that to happen, what are the current short-term impacts and what are the long-term impacts? This is what we try to visualize in Bayanat, and of course, this is how we actually harbor all the data that comes from M42 and all the data from the laboratories to build that up, and of course, working closely with the Environmental Agency of Abu Dhabi and being able to actually work with them on understanding fisheries, the impacts, be it maritime or on land as well, is quite important. And I think that's in a nutshell what we do in Bayanat.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. This to me was probably the most refreshing panel discussion that I've had, bringing so unique, different industries and skill sets all onto one table to serve the One Health concept is what I think is the new vision for environmental science. So I'd like to take the opportunity to really thank you all collectively and our special guests, the Excellencies as well, and please give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. A fascinating panel discussion. May I request you to please get a group photograph to commemorate this moment. We've been so pleased to have our special guest join us. If I can ask the official photographer to please come into position. Fantastic. Our technical staff have been brilliant throughout, capturing brilliant photographs. An amazing moment and such a fascinating panel discussion. May I also get a photograph for the photographer? I'm going to join as well because this is a great occasion to celebrate this. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for our wonderful panel discussion. We're back in 2 minutes with the next one. Thank you.